Okay, so I'm sure you guys have all seen the press conference video of James Harden yesterday, basically publicly requesting a trade without actually saying, hey, get me out of Houston, I don't want to be here anymore. I can't actually show the clip because anything close to copyright on this channel is a big issue. Those of you that are not relatively new know that there's like 50 videos on this channel that I can't show you and aren't on YouTube because of copyright stuff, including a video in which I predicted that LeBron was going to go to the Lakers like months before free agency even started. So we can't show copyrighted stuff. But I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen the clip by now, right? James Harden wants out of Houston. We know this. But in this video, we're going to be talking about, why, not necessarily that he deserves to ask out of Houston, but that the era in Houston while James Harden was there was wildly more successful than most people want to give it credit for, and that it makes sense for him to want to move on now. So basically, this is kind of an in defense of James Harden. But quickly before we get started, if you enjoy content like this and consider subscribing, I upload twice a day, every day. You guys have been crushing it lately with the viewership and all those things. You guys have really been enjoying the content, which has been awesome to see. So if you like the NBA, this is a great place to be. You can go and subscribe. With all those things said, my name is Tucker. Let's go and get into the video. So James Harden gets to Houston, right, as a 23-year-old after his first couple of seasons in Oklahoma City, where he was a successful player, but was obviously in a much different role. Comes to Houston, 23 years old, goes from a sixth man to the offensive focal point of the Houston Rockets basically overnight, and shows up in a very shortened time frame in which to really get acclimated to his new teammates. He got traded in the fall, like right before the season was supposed to start. And throughout his career in Houston, he just got better every single year, continued to add to his game, and was incredibly durable in his time in Houston. He never missed more than 10 games in a normal regular season. Obviously, last year's season was weird. He also averaged 37 minutes per game in his career in Houston to this point, and he led the league in minutes in one of those seasons. So he has always been there for Houston, as he pointed out in his press conference. He's given a lot to the city, and I would happen to agree. And in the Mike D'Antoni era, once he got there, Harden became something completely different. He led the league in assists in his first season there with Mike D'Antoni as his head coach, when he famously came out and said that he thought James Harden was a point guard. And then he led the league in points per game every single year after that for the following 3 seasons, including setting a scoring mark for average points per game in an individual season at over 36 points per game that we haven't really seen anything like in the modern NBA, or at least not very many seasons close to it, depending on what you calculate as the modern NBA. So James Harden has been wildly successful as a Houston Rocket. And it's not just a statistical case either. In those first 3 seasons of the Mike D'Antoni era, before Russell Westbrook got there, they averaged 57 wins a year, which is a crazy successful mark, and second in the league only to the Golden State Warriors, who won a little bit over 60 games every single year on average, with Kevin Durant added to their roster beginning in that 2016 season through the end of the 2019 season, which again is right before Russ got there. So from a statistical and from a winning standpoint, especially in those 3 seasons that Mike D'Antoni was there, with the exception of the Russell Westbrook one, the Rockets were wildly successful. And the Warriors that I mentioned there are such a critical part of this story, because if you take yourself back to the KD era Warriors NBA, people complained so much about how the league was boring and about how we all knew who was going to win by the end of the year as long as they were healthy. It was Golden State, Golden State, Golden State, Golden State. They were so good. But you know who was the one team in the Western Conference that consistently looked at the situation and said, you know what, we're going to go ahead and we're going to try and compete with these guys. We're not going to be scared of them. We're going to give it everything we have, and we're going to try and beat them, and we're going to try and make it to the finals. That one team in the Western Conference specifically was the Houston Rockets, as evidenced by that 57 win average. Now, yes, in the Eastern Conference, the Cavs were there as well, but they could at least get themselves to the finals before having to face the Warriors. Pretty much everybody else in the West just took a step back and said, we're going to go ahead and plan on 2021 or 2020 when KD leaves, because we can't compete with these guys. And Houston just decided, no, we're going to go ahead and we're going to make a real run at this thing. And I would argue that when you go and look at that 2017 and 2018 NBA season, the Houston Rockets, not the Golden State Warriors, were the best team in the entire league and should have won the finals, or should have gone to the finals and should have won the NBA title for a variety of different reasons. I was heavily invested in that Rockets season that year. The YouTube channel had really started to take off at that point. I had made a video saying that I thought the Rockets were the best team in the league that year, not Golden State. And then once we got to the conference finals, which that year was basically the finals, those were the 2 best teams in the league. The Cavs were really good as well, but not on the same level that they'd been in the past. And Everybody knew that those were the two best teams. And once we get there, if Chris Paul does not get hurt and he plays in game 6, or if there is a game 7, I can almost guarantee you, having been there, I am convinced after watching those teams that they would have been in the finals and they would have won the finals and they would have been your 2018 NBA champions if Chris Paul never gets hurt, or if Kevin Durant never goes to Golden State and creates arguably the most stacked, talented roster in NBA history. If either of those things don't happen, the Houston Rockets and James Harden are 2018 NBA champions, which is why I would argue that this has been a wildly successful run in Houston, and I don't want to hear anything about Andre Iguodala being hurt in that series as well. We're not comparing the value of those two players. Chris Paul is wildly more valuable in that scenario than Andre Iguodala is. Had he not gotten hurt, had he played in game 6 and 7, they would have won that series. They were up in the series. They looked like the better team. They had the top offensive rating in the league. They had a top 6 defensive rating in the league. They had the top 3-point attempts as well as made in the league. They were one of the best 3-point shooting percentage teams in the league that season. They were going to win the title if Chris Paul had stayed healthy. And let's just continue down this path, this alternative reality in which the Houston Rockets end up winning the 2018 title. A lot of things that happen afterwards happen the exact same, but they make a lot more sense, right? So let's just say everything happens the exact same. Chris Paul gets traded, Russell Westbrook, the whole deal last year doesn't go so well. And now here we are in 2021 and James Harden wants to be traded because this team, as evidenced by some of the stuff I talked about earlier, went after something that nobody else did in that time period, and that was challenging the Warriors. They gave it everything they had for a 3.5-year stretch. It didn't work, all but that 1 year in 2018, in which we're now considering them as NBA champions in this alternative reality. And now the roster's fallen apart because they gave it everything they had. Now James Harden is in his 30s. He's played all but 10 games in every single season. He's led the league in minutes in that entire stretch. So why doesn't it make sense for James Harden to now be leaving the Houston Rockets? Now, I think that if they had won the title in 2018, we would be much more forgiving to Harden in this situation because he'd won a title. He gave everything he had to Houston, and now he's looking to move on in a scenario in which Houston is clearly moving on to a different era. They have a new coach, a new GM, a new owner. They've traded away significant pieces, and they don't have a contending roster. They arguably don't even have a playoff caliber roster at the moment, depending on what you think about DeMarcus Cousins, Christian Wood, John Wall, and Eric Gordon around James Harden. So had they won the title in 2018, maybe we're looking at this completely differently. Now, I understand that not only did they not win the title in 2018, and even without Chris Paul, they had the opportunity to, but they've also had playoff failures in the past, including once Kevin Durant got hurt with those Rockets teams, including going all the way back to some previous years in Houston in which James Harden had some massive playoff failures, and I'm not letting him off the hook for that. There have been moments in Houston in the postseason specifically that James Harden just has not shown up, and defensively he's never really been there either. But as a whole, specifically when you look at the 3 peak years, 3 of the best years that any team has had in the NBA over the last 10 years, those 3 Mike D'Antoni years stand out for Houston, not only within their franchise history since 2000, but in the history of the league over the last 15 years as 3 of the best years that any franchise has had while also not winning a title. And if he'd won the title in 2018 in a series in which I believe they were the better team, and had they been fully healthy, they would have won and they would have gotten past the Cavs as well, this situation would be looked at completely differently. Now, I say all those things to make my case that this was a successful run in Houston, and I don't think that that is something that is arguable. However, I also am not apologizing for the way that James Harden is treating this situation. He is under contract and he needs to be playing better for Houston. He needs to be taking it more seriously, and making the comments that he did publicly yesterday are not in the best interest of the team, right? And there are many different ways in which James Harden could have gone about this, and he has done a lot of things incorrectly in his ability or his wish to be traded away from Houston, and I get that. However, if you're looking at the era as a whole, I do think that he deserves credit. And had they won the title in 2018, I think you could argue that the perception of this situation would be wildly different than what it is right now. It was a successful run. No, it did not result in a title. There have been plenty of successful runs in NBA history that did not result in a title, but this is about as close as you can get with 2 different crazy scenarios resulting in Houston not winning a title. 1, Chris Paul getting hurt at the absolute worst possible time, and 2, a salary cap spike that allowed the Warriors to sign Kevin Durant and significantly raise the ceiling of their roster and ultimately run the league for a handful of seasons and prevented the Rockets from winning a title in 2018 that would have arguably changed his entire situation for Harden. So I'm not defending him necessarily for the way he's gone about the trade request, but when he says, I've given everything I can to this city and to this team, I'm inclined to believe him. And there you have it. That is going to be the end of the first of today's videos. I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Like I said, I upload twice a day, every day. It's a great place for consistent NBA content. You can leave a like rating on the video, and you can check me out at various socials. Those are at the bottom of the screen and a link tree down below. With all those things said, I hope you guys have an awesome rest of your day, and I will see you all next time.